The Freeway Phantom might be one serial killer. It may be two. Maybe they're alive, but they quit killing for some reason, like going to prison. Maybe they're long dead, or maybe they switched up their MO and moved on. We may never get to know. I hope, for the sake of the families, that we do get to know, and soon, who took the lives of five beautiful little girls and a young woman. The first killing that we know of was Carol Denise Spinks. She was only 13 years old and lived in a southeast DC area. During the evening of April 25th, 1971, her older sister sent her to a 7-Eleven store just a half mile away, just across the border in Maryland, to buy a few groceries. There were some TV dinners, some breads and sodas. And on her way home, she was abducted. It would be 6 days before her body was found at 2:46 p.m. behind the St. Elizabeth's Hospital on a grassy embankment next to the northbound lanes of the I-295. She was about 1,500 feet or so south of the Sweetland Parkway. An examination would show that she was both physically and sexually assaulted, and she was strangled. She was dressed, but she was missing her shoes. She had only been killed a few days before she was found, which likely means she was held captive for 3 or 4 days before being killed. And Darlenia Denise Johnson was only 16. She was from Congress Heights and on her way to her summer job at the Oxon Hill Recreation Center at 10:30 in the morning when she was abducted on July 8, 1971. She was seen by a witness in an old black car driven by an African-American male shortly after she was abducted. 11 days later, she would be found just 15 feet from where Carol's body was found in April. An anonymous caller, who had details only the killer could have known, had notified police on July 12th where the body could be located. It's unclear why she wasn't found sooner. She was also dressed, but missing her shoes. Her body was too decomposed for examiners to determine her cause of death or whether or not she had been sexually assaulted. She was strangled, though. A little more than a week after they found Darlenia, on July 17th, 1971, 10-year-old Brenda Faye Crockett was sent to the store by her mom. She was from Northwest. When she didn't come right back home, her family went out looking for her, leaving her 7-year-old sister to wait at home. The phone rings around 9:20 p.m. and the little girl answered. Brenda was on the phone crying. She said that a white man picked her up and that she was coming home in a cab. She said she thought she was in Virginia and then abruptly said goodbye and hung up. Not long later, the phone rang again, and this time Brenda's stepfather answered. Brenda repeated what she said earlier and asked, "Did my mother see me?" Now that might be an incredibly important clue that when she was abducted, perhaps she passed her mother who was out looking for her. She also told him that she was alone in a house with a white male. The stepfather tried to have the man come to the phone, but all he heard was heavy footsteps in the background before Brenda said, "I'll see you," and hung up. Police believe the killer made Brenda call and gave her false information to slow or distract the investigation and give him time to do what he was going to do and escape. Her body was found the next day at 5:50 a.m. by a hitchhiker along US 50 near the Baltimore-Washington Parkway in Prince George's County, Maryland. She had been raped and strangled. A scarf was knotted on her neck, and she was clothed but missing her shoes. On October 1st, 12-year-old Nenemoshia Yates was walking home around 7 p.m. from a Safeway store in Northeast DC. She was abducted, raped, and strangled. She was found within 3 hours, just off the shoulder of Pennsylvania Avenue in Prince George's County, Maryland. She did not have her shoes. Unidentified green fibers were found on her clothing. A witness saw her get into a blue Volkswagen. On November 15th, 1971, Brenda Denise Woodard was having dinner with a classmate. She was 18 and from Baltimore. She got on a city bus around 11:30 p.m. to go home to Maryland Avenue. 6 hours later, police discovered her body. She was stabbed multiple times, strangled, wearing her shoes, and a coat that had been placed over her chest. She was left in a grassy area near Prince George's County Hospital along an access ramp to Route 202 from the Baltimore-Washington Parkway. There was a note from the killer in a pocket of the coat, and it read, "This is tantamount to my insensitivity to people, especially women. I will admit the others when you catch me if you can. Freeway Phantom." You can see the note here. Authorities believe that the note was dictated to Brenda. The paper was torn from the victim's notebook. They also believe she may have known her kidnapper, noting that there were no indications of duress in the writing. Diane Dennis Williams was the last suspected victim. She was 17 years old and a Ballou High School senior. On September 5th, 1972, she made dinner for her family and then visited her boyfriend's house. She was last seen boarding a bus at 11:20 p.m. near his house. A few hours later, her body was found alongside I-295, just south of the district line. She had been strangled and her shoes were missing. There were no signs of sexual assault. Traces of semen found on her were assumed to be from her boyfriend. When they were tested years later, they weren't able to extract a sample that was good enough for comparison. Her sister would actually join the DC police and make a long career out of it, somewhere in the back of her mind always hoping that the killer would be caught and she would be able to be part of that process. And we'll point out some of the bigger problems in solving these cases first. It was the practice at Metropolitan DC Police for detectives to keep custody of the files that they were assigned to. The case files for these 6 cases are incomplete as a result. Some have been discarded nearly entirely, and others have pages or pieces of evidence missing evidence, notes, case files. It's just a huge blow. Another issue, as some of the family members pointed out, was mistrust of the police at the time. That likely prevented some folks from coming forward at all. There had been suspects over the years, including the so-called Green Vega rapists and a man named Robert Askins. Most investigators involved in the case believed their strongest suspects were the 4 men known as the Green Vega rapists. That could account for both the similarities in the cases and for some of the odd differences in the cases. None of them have been arrested or convicted of these crimes. Retired DC Police Sergeant Louis Richardson once headed up the Freeway Phantom investigation team, and he believes the Green Vega rapists are responsible, at least one of them. He says that they showed police the scenes, and at least one was able to describe the scenes, the clothing the girls wore, how they were killed. They had information that only the killer would have. All have been long past their parole eligibility, which came between 1980 and 2019 for the Green Vega rapes themselves. Melvin Gray, Nathaniel Davis, and Morris J. Warren gave information that was very accurate about the cases. Warren would stop talking, though, when he heard the Prince George's County State's Attorney, Arthur A. Marshall, say on the radio that there had been new incredible evidence in the Phantom case. The other problem is that the Green Vega rapists wanted immunity for the murders. Another detective on the case, Lloyd Davis, believed that the murders were committed by a lone black individual, about 50 years old, and someone that did not stand out. No one would pay any particular attention to him. He thought Robert Askins was the likely killer. Askins was back in prison after the murders and died there in 2010. He always maintained he had nothing to do with it. There were other rapist killers operating in the area at the time. Samuel Little was one of them. Though he did not target very young girls, he certainly did target girls as young as 18. The cases are open, and there is a reward of up to $150,000 for information leading to the apprehension and conviction of the person or persons responsible for these deaths. So if you know anything at all, maybe you were scared back then to come forward. Maybe you didn't trust the police. Maybe you knew the suspects back then and you were concerned about coming forward and being known as someone who cooperated with the police. Maybe you just saw something and you weren't sure it was significant or important, and so you didn't say anything. Please come forward. It doesn't matter how old or insignificant or small you think your information is. It's not too late. Help give these families the answers that they deserve. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying these videos and want more, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any videos. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.